All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the last workshop of the day. I hope you've all been enjoying the event so far. And to wrap the day up, we have a really exciting workshop taught by Jimmy Wang. Jimmy's a former McMaster alumni himself, and he's actually the co-founder of McMaster's own hackathon, Delta Hacks. He's previously worked at Google for a few years, where he worked on a new operating system for smart home technology called Fuchsia OS, I believe. And he's currently working as a software engineer at Figma, working on a tool called FigJam, I believe, where it's a whiteboard tool that helps teams collaborate. So today we're really lucky to have him teach our workshop on an introduction to Stable Diffusion, what it is, some tips for using it, and we're going to be hopefully generating some images ourselves in this workshop just through text prompts. So without further ado, you can take it away, Jimmy.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So an intro to Stable Diffusion. So what is Stable Diffusion? Stable Diffusion is a state-of-the-art machine learning model that takes a text prompt and can convert that to an image. It's trained on 2.3 billion images with captions, so definitely a lot of images. It was open sourced and released by StabilityAi on August 22. And kind of what makes it a lot more special than previous image generation models is how it adds a noise along with the text embedding. So I guess one way to kind of look at that model is it takes a text prompt, it converts the text into a list of like vectors in a latent space. So kind of like how the semantic meaning might be embedded. And then it also passes a random image to, random noise into a diffuser, and it creates the image as the end result. So in general, there are three main components to a prompt. You have a frame, you have a subject, style, and an optional seed. The frame, subject, and style are part of a text prompt, and the seed is kind of the random noise used to initialize or seed the model. So one way to think about it is, given a particular seed, which is your random initial values, and then a text prompt, you have a point in this kind of vector space, and this is where the generated image might belong. Similarly, style images will be very close, so changing the text prompt somewhat or changing the noise slightly within this area will actually generate you similar looking image results. So let's talk about the frame component of a text prompt. The frame of an image is the type of image to be generated. So examples of frames include like portraits, photography, digital illustration, watercolor, etc. So you can also see you have a lot of different styles for what an image might look like given different types of frames. So a digital illustration is quite different than an oil painting. Another part of the text prompt is the subject. The main subject for a generated image can be anything you can dream up. So it could be a picture of a person shopping at a grocery store, a picture of a house in a suburban neighborhood, or Darth Vader riding a go-kart, or a portrait of Taylor Swift. So if you add a style text prompt as well, it can actually give additional information to the Stable Diffusion model of like what you kind of want the image to look like. So the style image has different facets. So some key ones that are good to add is kind of like the lighting, the theme, the art period. So like details that you can say it's like a picture of a house in a suburban neighborhood from what we had before, but instead you can add additional style information like it's beautifully lit, it's so realistic, art, highly detailed like 8K, and then from the picture of the person shopping at a grocery store, we added, oh, it's by Van Gogh. So it created an image in the style by Van Gogh. And similarly, Darth Vader and a portrait of Swift by a specific artist as well paints it in that kind of style. So what was the seed thing we talked about? So by default, Stable Diffusion uses randomized initial values, seeds, for its starting state, so that each run of it actually generates different images. So if you want to generate the same image, you would need to specify the same seed. So let's kind of look at an example of the text prompt from before: a portrait of Taylor Swift in a scenic environment by Arfemo Leonard. It's using the Stable Diffusion model 1.5 FP16. So given the same initial random values, we actually see that this one generated with a seed 5281, and this is the image. But every single time we kind of run the model again, we actually get a different seed each time. So this could actually be a way. So even for the same text prompt, the model will actually initialize different random noise at the beginning. So it can actually generate different variations based on your text prompt. And they can be quite different. This one's a close-up, this one's further away. But if you want the same image, so you want something that's similarly styled with the text prompt, you actually want to use the same seed value along with the text prompt. So in this case, I use the same seed value, then I'll get the same image. Some things I haven't talked about yet is what is the scale and steps value that's part of an image. So these are additional parameters to tweak your stable diffusion model. Steps is kind of the different steps the algorithm runs through to generate details into the image. So you can think of it as almost like a quality step. A general rule of thumb is like more steps means more detail, but in some cases you might not want this. So here's the image with this text prompt at different step values. So 10 steps, 50 steps, and 100 steps. So you can see the 10 steps is a lot more simplistic with less detail. And a good rule of thumb is usually to use like 50 steps. And the next parameter you can also tweak is the guidance scale. So this is the level of freedom or strictness you allow the AI when creating from your prompt. Higher values force the AI to follow your prompt, but it's not necessarily good to make it too strict because then you might get weird artifacts. It's better to kind of let it kind of like generate something a bit more generalized, but still following your prompt. So a good recommendation is something like 7.5 for the guidance scale. So looking back at our previous images, you can see if I use the same seed, but I don't use the same guidance scale or steps, I actually get an image that looks a bit less detailed and slightly different. So the same seed and text prompt will generate you the same image. But if you can also kind of tweak the details a little bit by changing the guidance step, how strict you want the AI to follow your text prompt, and then the quality steps. So what are some limitations of stable diffusion? Diffusion models tend to fuse two subjects into one subject, so you get some funny results. Like when you say elephant giraffe, it will actually try to create a hybrid elephant giraffe. So adding prepositions like behind can help, but usually it's better to do one distinct subject in the picture. Another thing is with face distortions. So the model isn't so good with faces once you have groups of faces. So once you have more than these subjects, you can tell the faces here are slightly distorted, or actually badly distorted, to be honest. It's also kind of bad at text generation, funny enough, even though it takes text as the input. So this prompt had an example of like the word scale on a t-shirt, but it kind of generated more so based on the semantic information rather in what a text on t-shirt might look like similarly, and not exactly like keeping account of like the words and matching that exactly in your generated model. So if you want to run stable diffusion, here are a couple different web tools that might be good. So you can go to mage.space, and this is an online web app that allows you to run a stable diffusion model online. If you have a Mac, another one that's really good is also like Diffusion B. So you can run your text prompts and generate images there. So all the images I use in the slides were actually images I generated myself. So I think to maybe keep this a bit simple, we can use the web app so that everyone can kind of follow along if they like. So what are some other helpful tools? So a helpful tool is actually to use a search engine for different prompts. So example is Lexica. So take some time to load. So you actually see all these images are generated by stable diffusion models. So if you press a particular image, it will tell you what is the text prompt used to generate this image and tell you what's the initial value, the seed value, the guidance scale, how strictly it wanted it to follow the prompt. And we kind of use the prompt to inform how we want to do our generations. In this case, I had already generated some cool ones from prompts before that we can kind of look at. So example is this prompt. So if we use these images, use this text prompt. So you can see there's actually a lot of like tweaking in order to get a very specific prompt. So there's a lot of different style information like 8K, ArtStation, concept art. They also added something to kind of like enforce like the image is kind of symmetrical for portrait. And then we click generate. So generating now. So this is the image that was generated from the Stable Diffusion. So if you can see, if I copy the seed, and if I run, actually, let me run this again without the seed, and you'll see it actually generates something different each time because the machine learning model automatically chooses a different seed value. But if you wanted the exact image we generated before, you can go in advanced mode. If you pass it the seed, I haven't changed the quality of guidance steps. So, but we know before that, as long as the text prompt and seed are the same, you'll get mostly the same image with just the quality and guidance scale affecting like the slight quality on like kind of how detailed it is. So if we run this again with the same seed, we actually get back the same image we got back before. And also to kind of give you a taste of like other images that might maybe generate, let me just find the page. Midjourney kind of has a showcase of really curated nice examples. So all of these have been generated by Stable Diffusion. So given particular text prompts, these are some of the images that were generated. Yeah, and they can look quite dramatic and amazing. Wow, this one is face made of newspaper. Wow, I'm surprised it generated something just from a very simple prompt. Usually you have a bit more detail like photorealistic Halloween, beautiful woman warrior. Let's see, imposing, highly ornamented fantasy castle carved from sapphire stone atmosphere. Dramatic. Let's see. So one thing we kind of looked at before is text prompts are pretty powerful, but then it's not too great because it's harder to kind of control exactly how you want the image to look like. So you can additionally provide an image as a prompt. So here we just generated a sneaker without really specifying. Let me actually generate this live. So this is one of the images I generated before. I wanted kind of like a cool sneaker to show, but because the text prompt, it's kind of hard to convey composition information about where I want the shoe in the frame. It kind of generates it without really knowing about this as a detail. Instead, you can actually pass it an image as an input as well. So this is called image to image along with your text prompt. So here I have, this is my input image, and this is the generated thing with the image plus the prompt. So let's try this again. This time, let's pass it this image. Here you can choose the strength you wanted to put of using this image. The stronger the strength, the more it will try to use the features from the input image. So I'm ready. It's going to use the text prompt I have before, but now it's going to use my input image as well. So there's kind of two sources of input, and I'm going to let it generate the initial values randomly, the seed. I don't really want to specify one. Let's see what this gives us. Little funky, but pretty cool. I think it didn't quite match the composition nearly as much, but you can tell it's already kind of a step up from the before, where the shoe can kind of be anywhere in an image. Oh, this one's looking a bit better. So it's kind of like laid out on top of this platform I drew. And it also kind of like took into account the fact that I added kind of like a purple highlight streak going at near the bottom of the sole. So why might image to image be really cool for design? I think one really powerful use case is like for rapid prototyping from sketches. So let me open a Figma file. So one cool Figma extension is called AI. So let's say I'm designing a Figma. I made this rough sketch for a shoe. I'm kind of interested in kind of seeing what might the shoe look like. Let me just move these. These were pre-generated ones I generated previously. Let's select a frame, put in some detail, and then let's give me 4 images. I want to render it. So let's say you're a designer coming with a new shoe. You might want to try it out with different materials, different looks, futuristic, type of neon. Or you want more like a classic shoe. You can also kind of put New Balance as kind of a prompt if you're you like that type of style of shoe, and it's rendering. So these are all the renders I got using my initial rough sketch and this prompt. And I got these different shoes that look quite similar to the initial image composition I set up. So they're on a platform. Oh, this shoe has a very cool like bottom. A lot of them very glowy, probably because I said futuristic cyberpunk neon. Oh, this one's very cool, very clean and white. And another one is I kind of added New Balance into saying basketball sneakers. So this actually generated kind of more like retro looking shoes with kind of a New Balance aesthetic. So this plugin is Ando AI. I'll make sure to send the slides out so people can kind of like walk through the different resources and links themselves. Yeah, I think that's the presentation. I can also try to generate. Oh, actually, there's one more thing I wanted to show you. Just remembered. So some of the things that might be kind of cool to explore with the Stable Diffusion is you can actually emulate a lot of different artist styles. So here is the prompt. This is prompt 1 to 3 is a portrait of a character in a scenic environment by the artist. And then the prompt 4 to 6 is a building of a stunning landscape by the artist. So in this example, they use the first 3 images follow the same prompt. And then the last 4 to 6 was this prompt, a building a stunning landscape. So you can see, given even very simple prompts, if you have a very strong kind of like style modifier, you can actually generate quite distinct images. So the one I quite liked a lot for generating some of the portraits Taylor Swift was using Alfred, a surrealist artist. And these are some of the pictures and the style. And these are actually not the real pictures from them. All the images on this page were generated by Stable Diffusion. So it's what it thinks the style might look like, but it's not actually real portraits painted by the artist. So I think in total, this page has about 3,377 artists so far for you kind of explore. So if you have an artist you particularly like this style, you can use them as kind of a strong modifier on the image you want to generate. Yeah, and I think that's it. How do I take questions, actually? Oh, yeah, I will make sure to send this deck out in the Discord channel.
Hello. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That was an awesome, insightful presentation. Yeah. So the way we're going to do questions is I'll just read the questions from the chat and then you can answer them. And I think I also have a few like personal questions, which will be good. So yeah, you just answered Jerry's question, so the slide deck will be available. And before we get to the next question, I think like my question can like go into that really well. So the thing that offers the most like variability with all these images is probably the seed, as you said, right? So can you go into a little bit more detail on like more about the seed and like what exactly like is it?
Yeah, I would say actually both the text prompt and seed affect the image quite a lot. So Stable Diffusion, kind of the secret sauce is they realize it's rather than only using one layer of information, just like the text embedding, so like what might the semantic representation of the text mean, they add an additional random image. So it's just like if you ever open a TV with like static, it's just like a static set of noise. And then from this static noise plus the image, it can kind of slowly diffuse or run through the different steps to generate the end image. So actually, and I guess the way to think about it is they actually train the model with the given image caption pairs, and they added a bunch of noise to the image. They actually try to taught and train the model to, from a very noisy image, how can you change that into a real image? So it's actually teaching it a way to turn random noise into images. And because they kind of encode the text as well, so the text with the random noise actually has 2 different spaces. So you can actually generate much more general images. And I guess maybe getting back to like a more simplified explanation is it's best to kind of think about the seed and the prompt as 2 coordinates that you can use within this space. And when you provide the same seed in the text prompt, you'll get back the same image as I shown before.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, that definitely clears it up. So this is the seed is like basically just the amount of like noise, kind of like you're adding to the image, and then it like finds a new way to make an image based on like all the noise.
Yeah, it's like a random initial values.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's why when you run it multiple times, it generates a different seed randomly. But if you use the same initial random values in the same text prompt, it'll generate you the same image.
Awesome. Yeah. We can get to Kieran's question now. He said, what differs between different image generation models, and what makes one model better than the other? That seems like a more like subjective question, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think the previous state of art was GANs, generative adversarial like networks. And I think maybe what is kind of like a thing that the secret sauce of this new model is more so this kind of diffusion one. It was kind of an insight where, oh, if we added this and taught a model like how to generate from random noise to the image, it can be a lot more generalized. So it has a lot more different areas it can kind of take in. I think one of the pitfalls of the previous models were that given a single prompt, a lot of times there wasn't additional way to have it generate more different ones. So like for certain images, it might, certain text prompts, it might actually just want to output one image because it doesn't have this additional extra layer of abstraction. So I would say that what makes Stable Diffusion much better is just this additional secondary step and secondary part of the architecture, the diffusion part.
Going off of that, you mentioned like just compared to like the other kind of AI image generation models, and you mentioned like that extra layer that Stable Diffusion has, which is like that static. How does this differ from things like DALL-E 2, which are other image generation model kind of like programs?
Yeah, actually, DALL-E is a diffusion type model. So DALL-E is actually using the same architecture. So the reason I mostly kind of talked about Stable Diffusion is because it's a diffusion model that was released in open source. So diffusion model is a type of machine learning model. Stable Diffusion was just the name of one of the model. DALL-E is also a diffusion model. But the cool part is the company open sourced the model. So anyone can run this on their own computer, as I have on this like machine. Whereas the DALL-E and other previous models were much more gated, beta accessed, and it wasn't as available to people.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned, one of the best use cases for like Stable Diffusion, you mentioned is rapid prototyping. And like coming off of that, one of the questions we have here is: do you see Stable Diffusion do you see Stable Diffusion will be the core of future evolution of digital art?
I think Stable Diffusion will definitely be a big component. I don't think it will replace like artists. I think what it will do is it'll allow you to kind of experiment with different textures, elements and like shading and lighting for your composition. But as you can see, kind of like the initial values, it might sometimes like generate a very strange one. You kind of have it's still kind of up to the artist to kind of compose how they want the image to kind of evolve. And I guess the other thing with Stable Diffusion is it might not be able to combine and remix things in a way that like makes a lot of sense. Sometimes if you're really interested in two different styles, it might create something that clashes a bit more. So I think it's usually still up to a personal artist to kind of determine exactly how they want the image to look, but they can kind of use this AI model as kind of a guide to experiment with different ways it might look and then pick and choose elements they like from it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The next question we have is kind of more of like your own personal thoughts, which would be really interesting to hear. And it's: do you think images generated by these models can be considered art? Because apparently there's a few recent controversies regarding somebody submitting one of these AI generated images to an art competition and winning. So yeah, Omar would like really love to hear your thoughts, and I would as well, like just on that.
Yeah, I think my opinion is a bit more freeform. I feel like art is whatever you want to make of it, like whatever think enhances your creativity. I think with every like technological advancement, things become much easier to do. I think when photography was invented, people said, "Oh, this would be the death of a lot of like realistic like portraits and whatnot." And I think it, in a way, it kind of did devalue like very extreme technical skills. So like no longer was actually the benefit of like replicating and painting the most realistic picture possible that looks exactly like a photograph, because then it might be easier to kind of reproduce that just using a photography. Then it kind of lends itself more to like, what are like your own creative like inputs. So I think surrealism, impressionism are definitely kind of like counter movements where like it kind of really shows like what humans can do creatively. I think maybe what Stable Diffusion kind of does, it does kind of like allow you to mix and match a lot of different styles, but you still kind of need kind of like human creativity in like what you want the final image to look like. But maybe now you actually don't need as much technical skill. So let's say you know how you want to lay out your image, but maybe you're not as good at like shading like plants, because like the glossiness is kind of hard. But so an AI model can definitely assist with that. So I think maybe what we need is kind of different judging criteria for the competitions. Maybe some competitions should be judging purely on like the how you actually like draw on the thing and like your technique in that, and you can still judge on the technical skills and not allow AI images in that sense. Because I think at the end of the day, somebody who has the technical skills to draw the image like exactly will still be able to create a better image than the machine learning model, because they can control all the outputs of the image.
You actually just answered one of the questions I was going to ask, which is kind of relating back to the digital, like the people, like the design aspect and the digital artists who usually make the prototyping of like these products. And I was actually going to ask, do you think that this may be kind of like the like more of like leading to the death of like that digital art or like industry of people manually sketching themselves? But you kind of answered that it's still like up to this point better for an actual like artist who knows like all the shading, all like the actual proportions to make an image rather than this AI. So yeah, we have another question in the chat, which is, do you think AI in the future will design our UIs from the ground up?
I think I don't think it can design it completely from scratch. Like as you notice, I had to kind of give a very specific like framing of like what I want it to be, like what is kind of the semantic information present in the image. And even then, when you generate with just text is actually kind of like a lossy. It's a bit too abstract, so you actually cannot control how things will look as well. So you still need to provide a lot more like input and like massaging to get it to generate exactly the content you want within the same composition. But I guess maybe the question is like, maybe for some UI things, like if you just want like a regularly style button that, and you just draw a long rectangle and said, AI, please generate like a web button for this, I think it would be able to do that pretty well. But if you think about it another way, we have most web UI now uses like frameworks like Bootstrap, which are component libraries with that. If you have a specific shape you want and functionality, it has that style. So I think we have already kind of like democratized like sharing different like styles in like UIs. Like Swift has like a UI kit, and so does like the web. So I think this isn't actually too far of a jump from that if you think of it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I thought that was like a really like good question, because usually we think of like AI in like just image generations, but especially it's very relevant to this since this is a UI UX like designathon. But like in the future, maybe AIs could actually be able to like make our entire like user interfaces or entire websites just by themselves. A question that like I have is, so StabilityAi is the one like organization which released Stable Diffusion. Do you know where they like got all these data sets like to create these images?
Yeah, it's from a open source data set called Leon. Let me just check. I think it's called LeonDB. It's like a 5 billion image set, so it includes like other language models. Explain. Train. Oh yeah, Lion. Is the data set. So it was an nonprofit project that kind of creates a giant data set for people, researchers to use to train whatever the models they like. And this is 5 billion images with text pairing. So if you see this is a French cat, it has different images mapped to the caption. So this is kind of the image set used. And I guess a good question is also about like kind of the bias image set. The image set used is predominantly like English focused. So I think an example someone shows, like if you type salaryman, it kind of shows more of a American worker rather than like, let's say, a Japanese worker in like different cultural contexts. So there have been models where people have wanted to use Stable Diffusion and train it on other image sets in other languages that have a lot more cultural like awareness. I think another one is like Japanese Stable. Yeah, so this one wanted to retrain the model. So example, Salaryman. This is definitely more Western focused oil painting, and it wanted to train more like given Japanese text and also map to Japanese image. So this one is a lot more like kind of like the art space is more like contextual to different cultures, and language actually changes quite a lot as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting discovery. We just got a bunch of like rapid fire questions, but we're reaching our time limit, so I'm going to get through them like really quickly, just so everybody can get their kind of concerns out of the way. So, what technologies have you seen in recent years that have genuinely blown your mind and made you feel that we're really in the future?
I would say this is definitely like up there as one of the technologies. I think for a while people didn't really think we would be able to have quite a generalized way of generating completely new images. I think a lot of what we saw before, generating photorealistic faces, a lot of it is like the face is a lot more like similar, like framing, composition, and you're kind of just like making sure you can like get the specific details right. And it feels more like kind of pattern matching. I think this one is in a way still pattern matching, but because of, I guess, the way they architecture it and like made it a lot more generalized, being able to go from random noise image, you can actually generate a lot more general images. So I guess something like Darth Vader riding a go-kart would not be a common image that would exist. So you know this model isn't really pattern matching. It's actually kind of knowing how to combine two distinct concepts together.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, this is very interesting. We have another question from Kieran. How exactly does the reference imaging technique of the Stable Diffusion work? And how does the model compare to the input image to a latent space to determine which output image will be similar?
Yeah, so I don't quite know all the details for the input using an image as an input and how that maps to the noise. But my general understanding is like it's part of the kind of the secondary step. So this image is used to see the initial noise. So rather than the noise being completely random, it's going to try to have some steps that already is kind of in this image with some noise added, so that the image can know how to fill in the noisy bits and generate kind of the model one. But some of the parts of the image is already kind of fleshed out. So if you think about the steps before, it's when you specify the different steps, it generates more detail, right, from the previous one. So we almost kind of like jumped in here with kind of an initial very low quality step. And then we told the AI to continue from here, rather than telling it, please start from scratch with a completely random seed, completely random values.
Interesting. Yep. I hope that answered Kieran's question. And we have one more question from Omar. So we've been talking a lot about how this affects digital art and images, but Omar said that Meta just showed off their Make a Video AI, which generates a video based on a text prompt. Do you think that this follows a similar process as Stable Diffusion? And with that in mind, how do you think this will kind of affect the industry of stock images and videos? Do you think that they may be on the verge of being obsolete?
Yeah. So let me see. Meta's. Oh, I think it's a Midjourney. Yeah, actually. So Meta's Make a Video is also a diffusion type model. So I would say diffusion type models are actually the state of the art currently for generating from a text prompt to an image. So it's actually using the same architectural technology. So I guess with that in mind, like our stock photos and videos on verge being made, obviously, I think very general stock photos are likely going to be more obsolete. But if you think about it in a way, like a stock photo of a bench in a park was never really that creative in the first place. I think these are more like very, and even I guess maybe another thing to think about is like with people, even IKEA actually switched to making their furniture models in 3D rather than taking photographs. So I almost see this as like a one step later. So like rather than even having to like create those models or like draw the thing in the first place, you can kind of like give a rough prompt or maybe a rough sketch and you can generate like the same thing. So I think a lot of the stock ones where it's more like here, I just want something very simple and it's placed in real life and there isn't much changes in like creativity, like lighting and style. I think those ones are going to be very simple for this model to like emulate.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear like your thoughts on like all these kind of like effects on like the industry. And I think we've just about reached our time, so I'm just going to say a last like question that I was like thinking myself, and that was it was less of a question, more just kind of a like assurance. So talking about like the specific model, these are all based on diffusion models. Would you say that the diffusion model is kind of like the number one type of model in the industry, or where would you rank it exactly?
I would say it's actually the number one model. I think most of the cutting edge, like text to image things you're seeing now are all based on this kind of model.
Awesome. Yeah.
But who knows if this one model will be like the best in the future? We kind of like went through it with the limitations, so it has quite a lot of limitations as well. So there's definitely improvements that you can make to the model, or even kind of like newer, more high performant like architectures.
Awesome. Yeah. And yeah, we've just about reached our time. So I want to say thank you so much, Jimmy, for taking the time to come to our workshop and teach this like really interesting topic, which is like really kind of like a banging industry right now. And yeah, it was really exciting. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'll post the slides in the Discord and maybe try to stick around to answer a few more questions. Yeah,
Okay.
have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.